Well, let's start with the pomegranate. I've opened the pomegranate, and I'm afraid I don't really like to be rude. I cut it open, and the juice didn't fly too badly. I did want you to see this, though. You basically you break them open, and on the inside it looks a lot like they look like corn kernels. This is rude to eat in front of someone, but here we go. Anyway, they are very good. There was one student I had one time, he tasted it, loved it so much, he told me the next day that he had his mother buy him 4 at the grocery store, and he ate all 4 of them. I'm surprised he survived. I mean, one of them is enough, but the memories. Okay, anyway, this is going back a little bit. Gaia, I wanted you to know that there's something called the Gaia hypothesis. It's such an optimistic idea. There's this idea, it's just a hypothesis that scientists have, that the Earth tends to take care of itself. This would be so happy if it were true. That global warming, for example, will be solved by Earth itself. That if Earth finds that it's getting too warm, it will get more cloudy and it'll cool itself down again, and it's self-controlling. Interesting idea. It's just a hypothesis, it's not proven. But anyway, when they gave that a name, they called it the Gaia hypothesis, because Gaia is the Greek name for Mother Earth. All right, now, from your viewing of Clash of the Titans, which I hoped you would do, here are some of the things I wanted to pull out from there. And there's probably others, but the riddle game. The riddle game, in it, Perseus solves a riddle. Well, that is an epic theme, 5 point whatever, back in your notes. I'd like you to add it to your epic themes. The riddle game very often comes around. A riddle should not be confused with a joke. They're usually not funny. I mean, people will do riddles for fun, I know nowadays. But as an epic theme, it's usually deadly serious. Typically, the way the riddle game goes is if you solve the riddle, something wonderful happens. But if you don't solve it, you die. Well, we've run into it. Calabas's riddle had to do. The answer was a ring. Two pearls in a circle of gold, and he figured it out. He got the answer. And so he got to marry Andromeda, although the story goes on, he had to save her. Another example would be Gollum versus Bilbo in The Hobbit, in Tolkien's first book, before the trilogy, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. He wrote The Hobbit, and Riddles in the Dark was one chapter. A whole chapter devoted to the riddle game. Now, J.R.R. Tolkien was a student of this kind of literature. I think you called it in England, he was called a philologist, I think, someone who studied old cultures and stuff. And it's so evident, he even translated Beowulf, I think. It's so evident in his work. Well, there he's got a chapter devoted to the riddle game. The riddle of the Sphinx may be the most famous riddle of them all, and I'll run that by you soon, within a week or so. When I get to that story, I'll run that one by you. In a movie called The Labyrinth, David Bowie, I think, was the most famous person in that. There's a scene there where this girl has to solve a riddle, or else she dies. You might have seen that. The riddle game is spoofed in Monty Python's Quest for the Holy Grail. I didn't write the whole thing out because I don't know if that's really the right name, Holy Grail. Later on I'll tell you more about this movie. There's nothing that I show the kids all year, I don't think, that they think is funnier than that movie, which is such a stupid movie in so many ways, but kids seem to just love it. Well, anyway, in the Bridge of Death scene, the riddle game is spoofed. They have to answer 3 questions or they die. And, you know, the one guy, Sir Lancelot, keeps saying 5 when it's supposed to be 3. Come on, it's always 3. Anyway, it's spoofed there. All right, that was one thing I wanted to harvest from your watching Clash of the Titans. Now, moving on. What I'm going to do next week, and I been a little bit stressed about, could I possibly get it started now? But I gave up on that. As I move forward in Greek mythology, instead of trying to show you all these myths, I'm going to turn to adaptations of these myths, how they've been used. And an adaptation is a genre. It's a kind of literature. It's a favorite of mine. I really like a good adaptation. This would be in the third section of your notes, page 3 point something. And an adaptation, I define it this way. I say it's a famous old story in a new setting. Sometimes with new characters, names, sometimes with new names, sometimes they leave the names the same. Well, you know, in a sense I'm telegraphing my punch here. Part of me doesn't want to let you know about this so that you get ahead of me here. You know, when they box, if you telegraph your punch, you wind up before you punch. Well, Black Orpheus is wonderful. And it is an adaptation of the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. And on Monday, I'll tell you the myth, and I'll tell you some of what I want you to see in Black Orpheus. I'm in a dilemma because I can't just show you this Brazilian movie. But one of the advantages is if, since you know, if you could find a way over this weekend, this is Friday, over the weekend, to find a way to see Black Orpheus. It would be okay if you saw it before I told about it, I think. The darn thing is, though, it's in Portuguese. For a lot of my students, that may be the first time they've ever watched so much of a movie where they have to read the subtitles. It was a Brazilian movie. It is a Brazilian movie. Orfeu Negro is the name of it in Portuguese. A very famous song came from it. Manhã de Carnaval. Manhã tão bonita, manhã de dia feliz que chegou. O sol no seu surgiu. I may even get a guitar and butcher that for you next week. But it is wonderful. It won the Academy Award Best Foreign Film in 1959. A vision of beauty is what one critic called it. A wonderful thing, and I'll have more to say about it. Well, anyway, it's set in Brazil, 1959, and yet it's the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. That's coming. Pygmalion is another example of an adaptation, which next week I'll talk about it. I'll urge you to see some of it. It was eventually made into My Fair Lady. So I'm giving you previews of coming attractions here. And then Xanadu is a rather strange movie made in around 1980. It's an adaptation of the myth of the Muses. But I'm giving you these now because there are 3 examples and there are others. If I were getting more comments from my viewers, I have no doubt that some of them could tell me from their literary experience about others. I'd love to know. I like good adaptations. All right, that takes care of this week. This is Friday. Over the weekend, if you haven't watched Clash of the Titans already, I think, you know, if you could do something worse with your time than watch Clash of the Titans. And it's hard to think of something better that you could do with your movie viewing time than to watch Black Orpheus. But I hope to see you on Monday.